I'd like to ask, was there ever any realistic prospect of a 9-county exclusion of the Ulster counties, given that 100 years ago the signing of the Covenant was very much a 9-county event? But was that only rhetoric, or was it a realistic possibility?
Can I ask you to keep this brief, because it is on next week's agenda? Michael.
Well, I mentioned that very briefly, so I'll say virtually nothing about it now and pass on to my colleagues. Walter Long's committee wanted that, proposed that. Lloyd George wanted ultimate reunification of the 2 Home Rule areas, 9 counties and 23 counties. And Craig said no. We will not tolerate it. Now, you might ask, why was Craig able to overcome the wishes of the British government and impose his view on the British cabinet? The answer is that every Irish nationalist opposed the Government of Ireland bill. If the Unionists opposed it too, there would be nobody in Ireland prepared to operate it. There had to be somebody. The Unionists were the only people who could be considered as being capable and willing to operate it. Therefore, they had to get their way. Otherwise, it would simply fall through. So 9 counties was on the table and was turned down flat, quite successfully, by Craig and his colleagues.
I think just briefly you have to remember the Covenant was a protest against Home Rule. The Government of Ireland Act was the Ulster Unionists turning 180 degrees and wanting Home Rule. So they're very different situations. And that whole question of why Ulster Unionists changed their opinion on Home Rule over the course of the decade, I presume, is something that will be addressed in a later lecture, but the circumstances are very different in the intervening 10 or so years.
It was addressed last week by Jimmy Deanahan at a conference in Belfast, actually. You know, the only part of Ireland that rejected Home Rule for 2 generations, embraced it. And not only that, but the first Home Rule, the only Home Rule Parliament to operate in Ireland, opened in College Green, Belfast, behind Queen's, rather than College Green in Dublin, which had been the favoured site of the Home Rule Party for 50 years. Can I thank you all very much for coming this evening? Can I remind you about the evaluation forms, please, if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to get one, to fill one out. Can I thank our panel, Professor Laffin, Dr. Frank Costello, and Dr. Mary Coleman. And next week, can I just remind you, before you thank them formally, we have our 9th session next week. We're moving on to look at partition, treaty, and civil war. There's a guy called Phoenix leading that one. And he's been backed by Dr. Alan Parkinson, who's talking about the 1920s Belfast Troubles, shipyard confetti, that other aspect of the Anglo-Irish War period alluded to by Mary earlier. And Dr. Eve Morrison will be focusing on the insights from the Bureau of Military History. Dr. Fergal McGarry talked about this a few weeks ago. The Bureau of Military History archives on 1916. This will look at the War of Independence. Can we thank our panel? Thank you very much.